And I think marriage is meant to be a public institution endorsed by the state and protected by law and so on in order to give rights and but in order particularly to protect women, protecting men as well, but protecting women in particular. So I think that, my point really is yes, let's ban cousin marriage, but actually before we do that, let's ensure that marriages are registered.
Tim Dieppe, Head of Public Policy for Christian Concern. What a joy it is to talk to you. Just start off briefly, a quick hello, if you wouldn't mind, to our viewers and our listeners.
Well, thank you very much, Tony. It's great to be on talking to you again on with your valuable ministry at Coalition for Marriage.
Well, it's very nice of you to say so. It's a real delight talking to you. So many things I could talk to you about, and we have spoken to you about, and what a wonderful work you're doing as an organisation, and indeed yourself. But you wrote recently about something we wrote as well recently about, which was this idea of cousin marriage and the idea of marriage law in the UK, and that there are marriages taking place and so-called divorce taking place outside of the legal framework and the whole debate around that. But you wrote an article, Christian Concern published an article suggesting that the UK should ban cousin marriage outright. And I just wanted to talk to you about that as the Coalition for Marriage. I wanted to talk to you about that. What made you write that article? And perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about what your arguments were in that article.
Well, Tony, I've not really engaged with that subject before enough, really. And I, mea culpa, I should have done, I think, really, but I hadn't really spent enough time thinking about it. And I sort of came across an article about it, and it got me thinking. And I thought, oh, and I sort of investigated it, researched it, I sort of thought about cousin marriage and thought, I get, I don't like it, but is it really that big a deal? And as I researched it and got into it a bit more, I actually realized that the case of banning cousin marriage is a lot stronger than I ever thought it was. And so I sort of thought I need to write this up and explain it for people so we understand. Obviously, there has been a debate in Parliament about it. There was a private member's bill that attempted to bring this forward. There was also a Westminster Hall debate about this. And to be honest, I didn't really engage with it very much at that time. I mean, we were always very busy. I probably had something else, pressing and urgent to do at that time and didn't really properly have time to engage with that at that point. But more recently, I did sort of research and look into it and read some stuff about it. And I thought, gosh, this is actually a much bigger deal and much more important and much more of something that I ought to take seriously and we ought to be talking about and ought to explain to people why I think it is right and sensible and should be done to ban cousin marriage in the UK. So that's really why I wrote it.
I suppose everyone knows the genetic issues that can arise through first cousin marriage. Yep.
Yep.
And that's and the prevalence of that, and there's a whole debate and discussion around that. And the answer many would say to that is, well, genetic counselling in the NHS. We make sure that we test and counsel people, so that takes that out the equation. Given that, what other problems are there?
Well, let's just push back on that a little bit though, Tony, because do you think that we should have genetic testing for every married couple?
Well, it leads down a very interesting route, doesn't it? In terms of
because isn't that the first step towards eugenics?
Well, exactly. Yeah. I mean, many would say we're doing it already in the sense that babies are tested and you and I know that for certain conditions, even up to birth, just before birth, you can abort a baby. So some would argue it's kind of eugenics already in some senses. But what you're saying is,
I think it is. I think
let's not go further down that road.
Virtual destruction of people with Down syndrome from the population is a kind of eugenics.
Yeah.
So I don't really want to go down this route of genetic testing pre-marriage and anything like that, because that is very close, if not equivalent to eugenics in some form or other. And you've got this couple who are keen to get married, then you say, oh, but there's a is that the kindest way, and is it the right way, and are we therefore saying that some children are worth less than others, some babies are worth less than others, and all of that kind of thing? I think that's a big system to be debated. So, but yes, there are health problems with cousin marriages, and we see it in quite a lot of prevalence in some communities, not just Islamic communities, Jewish communities as well. And some other communities as well, where there's a lot of genetic defects and so on. We have, the fact is, the human species has been going for some thousands of years now, and we've accumulated a lot of mutations, and they're becoming a lot more common. And therefore, I think this is why we're seeing an increased prevalence generally in the population of genetic diseases, and that prevalence is much heightened by cousin marriage, massively heightened by cousin marriage, because if you're two relatives are carrying dormant genes and you marry and produce offspring, those dormant genes are likely to become active. So that's a very clear case, and that was as much as I knew about the subject, as much as I thought about the subject before. But then I realized, or in studying this, that there's also the whole thing of clan systems that plays a part in this whole cousin marriage thing. And I hadn't really appreciated that cousin marriage was banned by the church for many, many centuries, in fact, and even right up to six cousins for much of the Middle Ages. And of course, the church also promoted monogamous marriages rather than polygamous marriages. It's a whole other subject, related subject. But the church was kind of obsessed with the risk of incestuous relationships, and so banned cousin marriages right up to six cousins for many years. And the effect of this was to effectively undermine the clan system, whereby people are very loyal to their clan and are basically controlled by their clan. And the clan is a very coercive controlling system and part of the way to maintain clan ownership and clan property and clan dominance is to promote cousin marriage. And if you were forced to marry somebody further away than sixth cousin, you basically had to go outside your clan to find a partner. And that basically caused loyalty to go from the clan to the nation, to the wider group than that, and to the local community, to the local church, and that sort of thing as well, but break down the clan system. Now, what you have in Islamic communities in particular is you still have a lot of clans and a lot of clan systems that are around. Some people say the grooming gangs should be called grooming clans because that's part of what's going on here. They are often relatives, cousins, or whatever, and they all cover their own backs. And clans tend to produce corrupt, there tend to be corrupt things in clans because they all cover each other's backs and they kind of all seek their own interests. And so it's a prevalent way for corruption. So what I found is that when you can actually look at places where they have cousin marriage and places where they don't have cousin marriage. There's actually quite a lot of places where cousin marriage is banned. Multiple states in the US ban cousin marriage, and some other countries have banned it as well. And other countries are planning to ban it. And where it's banned, democracy is, the correlation with how strong democracy is much better where there isn't cousin marriage, where there is. And that is obviously because clan systems are broken down, and therefore, there's much better loyalty to the state and less of this clan corruption if you enforce banning cousin marriage. Whereas if you have cousin marriage, then it tends to be that the clan systems dominate and the clan loyalty dominates over all other loyalties, and then it produces a more corrupt system and undermines democracy. So I didn't realize and appreciate that aspect of the whole argument around cousin marriage until I researched it and got into it and studied it. And when you see that it actually correlates with democracy, you sort of think, wow, it's really, and also you see that many other states and countries have banned it and it stood the test of time. The ban has stood the test of time and it stood against, allegations of being a breach of human rights and legal challenges and all this kind of thing. You sort of think, well, why haven't we done this then? We should have really done this. There's multiple arguments for doing it and not really any very strong arguments not for doing it. You could, as a Christian, people look at the Bible and the text in Leviticus, which says you shouldn't marry any close relatives, and it specifies that you can't marry your mother, your daughter, your sister, all this kind of stuff. Cousins aren't specified there. And so people say, well, the Bible doesn't prohibit cousin marriage, therefore we shouldn't. But let's remember that originally people were marrying their brothers and sisters in Genesis, and that changed with the law in Leviticus. And there were also cousin marriages prior to that, and I think that one could say that the law banning marriage of siblings in the Deuteronomy was partly due to genetics. And then now the genetics has got worse. The law has changed anyway before. So I think there's a strong case for saying this is not an absolute, and we can, the same logic applies to strengthening the distance of relatives who you can marry. And I would say ban first and second cousin marriages.
People would come back and they'd argue, and so let's test this. Some would say, well, you've got two adults and maybe they agree not to have children or something. Why criminalize their marriage? Isn't, love is love, as they say, Tim?
Well, you could say that about anything, Tony. You could say, why can't I marry my dog or my cat, right? Or my car or something. So love is love is not an argument.
It's probably
right?
coming.
So I don't buy that as an argument. That's not really the point. Marriage is not that's not how you define marriage. You're saying, oh, because I love someone and I should be able to marry them. Well, in that case, I'd be able to marry my father or my sister.
Anecdotally, a lot of marriages of that nature take place outside of the legal framework anyway. So, firstly, what would you say we do to address this? And then why would people who currently aren't following the national legal system begin to follow the national legal system? Would it change anything, in other words?
Well, this is the other side of the argument, Tony, that there's no point in banning cousin marriage if we have lots and lots of unregistered marriages already, because then they're outside the law anyway. So this seemed to me that a lot of people who were making this case for banning cousin marriage didn't seem to appreciate that there's no point changing the law in cousin marriage if most of the cousin marriages are not being registered in law. And they're just getting married and calling it a marriage. And these are, the fact is that there are thousands of unregistered Islamic marriages around the country. And, probably a lot of the cousin marriages are those marriages. And they don't have proper legal status in law. So therefore, if the husband divorces his wife or leaves her or dies, the woman has no legal rights as a wife in those situations. So I've long argued that in order to protect the rights of women, Muslim women in particular, we should ensure that and enforce actually that all religious marriages are registered in law, so that this then protects all these women if their husband divorces them or abandons them or whatever. But it also has a secondary effect of preventing polygamy, because of course, if you're having unregistered marriages, you can have polygamous marriages, and there are estimated tens of thousands of polygamous marriages as well in the UK. Sometimes these women don't even realise, or weren't warned in advance, so their husband goes off and gets another wife, and this is another quote wife, but not legal wife, but it's a wife in their understanding under Islamic law, and you could put a stop to that practice by enforcing registration of marriages. And I think marriage is meant to be a public institution endorsed by the state and protected by law, and so on, in order to give rights, and but in order particularly to protect women, protecting men as well, but protecting women in particular. So I think that my point really is, yes, let's ban cousin marriage, but actually before we do that, let's ensure that marriages are registered.
So that's interesting, because that's one of my questions. If you had a choice, if you were going to Parliament and you were lobbying for one thing, would it be to make all marriage registered, or would it be to ban cousin marriage? Which would you do first?
The first step must be to register all marriages, and there's no point doing the one without the other, and that's the one that has to go first. So you say yes, you should do that one first. And the fact is that all Church of England marriages are registered, and all Jewish marriages are registered, and all Quaker marriages are registered. But Muslims, basically came to significance in our culture later and are an anomalous group in a sense that there's no requirement for their marriages to be registered. And consequently, you have all these issues. And then the whole thing about Sharia courts, which a lot of people talk about as a kind of parallel legal system, and it is a kind of parallel legal system, but estimates are that up to 95% of their business is dealing with divorce cases, because when there is a divorce, the woman has no recourse in British law. So what does she go? She goes to the Sharia law and tries to get recourse there. Of course, very difficult because of all the bias and discrimination against women in Islamic law and all that, but she pays a lot of money and tries to get some recourse and so on, and probably doesn't get very far. But if you shut down that avenue by saying, no, you've actually got rights in British law, and that will actually give you better rights than your Sharia courts would as well, then you'd effectively shut down 90% plus of the business of the Sharia courts as well. So you kill many, many birds with this one stone of saying, right, all these marriages must be registered. And so I think this would be the priority for me in terms of what the law should be on this. Yeah.
Great. Well, Tim Dieppe, that's. Are you going to? I mean, you've written an article. It's on your radar. Any further steps? I mean, what next?
Well, I think watch this space and see. It's not currently a big campaign issue for any of the political parties, particularly, I don't think. But we're wanting to raise the prominence of it and show people the benefits of this, and hopefully get it in some parties' manifestos for the next election if we can.
Well, if you need any help, Tim, get in touch.
Thank you very much.